Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Lubkowitz at Lub Goes Live. I'm a molecular biology professor at St. Michael's College, and I'm making YouTube videos for my students in molecular genetics and for anyone else who's out there that might be interested in science. And if you've been following Lub Goes Live, you know that every Friday, although I apologize, I know today's Saturday, I was just a little busy yesterday. Every Friday, I go over what was covered in Science and Nature, which are the two premier journals. And the origin of this comes actually about 19 years ago when I started every Friday in my classes going over what was published in Science or Nature. And why these two journals? These are really the career makers for scientists. So these two journals have some of the highest impact factors. They're broadly read, and it's sort of like what's the coolest, as I like to say, if you're published in Science or Nature, they're very often rewriting the textbook after your paper came out. Okay, so with no further ado, let's jump right into science and let's see what was published this week that might get us all thinking. All right, and it was a good week, by the way. Ooh, okay, here we go. This is sort of interesting. So we are not the only species right now that is suffering from a viral outbreak. Pigs have been plagued by the African swine fever since 2018, and 160 million pigs alone have been killed by this virus just in China. And there is now a vaccine that is being tested to see if they can save the pigs. And I'd like to believe that bodes well for us also. Here you go. So let's say you come up with a compound, and this compound inhibits your favorite pathogen or attacks some sort of or inhibits an enzyme that maybe isn't doing what you need it to be doing at the time. The question always is, how much of this compound do you need to put inside of a person to have an effect? And obviously, the lower the better, so you don't get side effects. And one of the ways that biochemists use to increase efficacy is by adding methyl groups, CH3s, where hydrogens normally are, to your favorite drug. Turns out that chemically, that sort of synthesis is not easy to do, but someone has come up with what they think is a protocol that will allow fast tracking or high throughput methylation of compounds, which ideally will lower the dose at which we have to take them. All right, here we go. This is an area that I don't normally read in, but geomagnetism. I'm gonna say it again because I think the word is that cool. Geomagnetism. So I didn't know this, but I guess at some frequency, there are big solar storms up in the sun. Actually, I did know that. And we get an EM pulse, an electromagnetic pulse that hits the planet. And now that we live in the technological age, there's fear that when that comes, and it will come one day, that we will, well, all our electronics and even our grid won't work for a certain period of time. So the US Geological Survey group went out and asked the question, are there some parts of the US that are more susceptible to a solar storm than others? And so what happens is when that energy hits the earth, it goes obviously into the earth, and then it can be propagated in certain types of rock. Actually, and I'm going to guess this rock is high in iron, even though iron is the fifth most common element in soil. Excuse me. So it turns out that the northern Midwest and anything east of the Appalachian Mountains, you're in the hot zone for an EMP. There's a solar storm. Your computer, probably your electrical grid, may not work for a little while. Oh, here we go. You may have heard of this because it's been all over the news, but Moderna Therapeutics is working with NIH, and they have now the first clinical trial of a COVID-19 vaccine. It is an is it attenuated? It is an RNA-based vaccine. It is, and no, actually, it's not RNA-based. Sorry, they're taking two of the spike proteins, and they're using an adenovirus to deliver it. They have 45 people in clinical trials, aged 18 to 55, and they're going to monitor them for 14 months. So, yeah, still going to take a while. All right, every now and then, you got to just wish you could write a title like this. All right, I'm just going to read to you this title. Oldest fossil of modern birds is a turducken. Okay. I would like to write a paper in Science and have a title like that. Oldest fossil of modern birds is a turducken. Oh, if only the Cajuns knew how much foreshadowing they had. So if you know, a turducken is a duck stuffed inside of a chicken, stuffed inside of a turkey. I might have gotten the order wrong there. But it turns out that the first modern bird, at least as far as we know, which was just found in Belgium It's a fossil that's 66.7 million years old. Looks like what you would probably imagine. Well, here, let me read it to you. It's a duck from the back and a chicken from the front. And I bet it was tasty. I bet it was tasty. Oh, this is a great review article. And it's looking at it. So it's been known for a long time that many diseases have a seasonal effect. So they go up during certain times of the year and down during others. And so there's 68 diseases that follow a very predictable seasonal effect. And of course, the reason becomes why. And some diseases are very easy to explain. So those that are mosquito-borne, like dengue, for example, the disease appears when the mosquitoes appear and it goes away when the mosquitoes go away. So it actually follows like a rain cycle. Others are actually really hard to explain, like smallpox would peak in California in May. What's something that's really unexpected? Hepatitis A, I mean, who would have thought, peaks in August. This is in the US. Pertussis in March, and what's the wildest one? Polio, back when we had polio, would peak usually in August and September. Now, it's thought that this is a combination of human behavior, maybe some environmental effects, but really quite difficult to tease out. And really the question of the article is COVID-19 going to do this also? Is it going to have a seasonal effect, or is it just going to be constant throughout the year? Unknown at this point, but interesting to reflect upon. All right, here we go. Just science, it just never gets old. So have you ever asked yourself, is this really worth the effort? I've been thinking about, I wanted to learn Klingon. I did, I thought, we should learn Klingon in this household. And of course, my wife pointed out that we should actually learn a language that's spoken on this planet. And I said, but what about if we go to another planet? All right, anyway, so she voted that it was not worth the intellectual, the mental, the cognitive effort to learn Klingon. All right, so this group was looking at what are the neurotransmitters that are used in that decision to put in cognitive energy. In other words, is it worth the intellectual energy to learn something? And they found that dopamine was actually the neurotransmitter that was most responsible for cognitive effort. What's interesting is they then went in to look at dopamine boosting drugs like ritalin. And here's the big reveal. So ritalin has very often been called the smart drug because people, not legally, take Ritalin, sometimes in studying for exams, to increase their output, presumably. And what they're now saying is that Ritalin doesn't actually increase your cognitive ability. It just increases your ability to do effort. Isn't that interesting? So it's not that it's making you, quote unquote, smarter. It's just fooling your brain into allowing you to work harder. I like that. I like that a lot, actually. All right. This one's great too. This is just a great week. Everything about this week is great. So scientists, for a long time, people have been making polymers that can conduct electricity. So the question is, can you make a polymer that can conduct an electrical impulse, and can you put it into a neuron? And the answer is now yes. And can you put it into, let's say, tissue cultures of neurons? And there are even these things called spheroids. They're like little mini brains that you can grow on a Petri plate. They're not conscious. And this group was actually able to do that, to actually engineer neurons that could conduct action potentials, electrical impulses faster. And then they put it in a worm and asked the question, did it work? Yes, the worm survived. And did the worm do anything differently? And the answer was yes. And did it do anything better? I mean, it's sort of hard to score as a worm doing better or worse, but the answer was yes. Very, very wild. Very, very wild. All right. All right, two really good ones here. This is one of these articles that at first glance doesn't appear to be, it appears silly at first glance. It turns out it's actually, as you'll see, quite revealing. So drones can be trained to fly and to avoid objects, but they capture everything in cameras through, they call it, not screenshots, reaction time, event cameras. And so there's only so many events you can capture per unit time. So another group, and they've often thought, well, we can get an AI to sort of predict what's going to happen, and that's how we'll get drones that are really reactive. So someone came up with what they're calling a camera that it measures changes in brightness. And as a result of that, it's a responsive camera. And so it can play dodgeball. That's the part that's great. So they wanted to say, is this drone really more responsive? So they have a drone. They either give it a normal sort of still capture camera, and then they throw tennis balls at it and see how the drone reacts and whether it wins. And then they did the same experiment, but this time they used this other type of technology, and the drone was a lot better. Of course, like, why should we care? Well, the idea is that if you're going to have drones that are doing things automatically and without sort of any input, having one that can dodge things is good, even if it's just like my kids throwing balls at them or shooting BB guns at them. Okay, so primates were thought to be the only animals that could do this, and that is statistical inference. So you've got a bowl, right? And so, for example, you've got a bowl and it's got something you really want in it, like peanut M&Ms, right? And one bowl has more than the other. And so primates can look at that and statistically infer which one has more of the good stuff and then make the right choice. Turns out parrots can also. There we go. And we thought we were clever. Turns out the parrot is pretty clever also. All right, for molecular genetics students, here we go. This one's really great. So a group just sequenced 929 human genomes from 54 geographically, linguistically, and culturally diverse populations to try to figure out how diverse is the human species, and found some really cool stuff. 67.3 million SNPs. For those of you that are not molecular biologists, a SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism, which still doesn't tell you what it is. It's what it means is that on your favorite chromosome, at your favorite position, I may have an A, an adenine, you may have a C, a cytosine. And that accounts for most of the differences between any two individuals. Just a single nucleotide here, a single nucleotide there. So across about 1,000 people, they found 67.3 million possible places where individuals could differ. They also found, and here we go, molecular geneticists, about 41,000 copy number variants. So if you've ever taken a biology class, we always say everyone has 2 copies of every gene. That's mostly true, all right? It turns out that any given 2 of us can have plus or minus 5% more DNA than anyone else. Sometimes more is better, sometimes more is worse, sometimes less is better, sometimes less is worse. And anyway, so they found about 41,000 instances where 2 individuals might differ in genetic content. And here's the wildest of them all. Of course, as we all know, we are, as most species are, we hybridized over time. So we have some Neanderthal DNA in us, and we also have some Denisovan DNA, which is, some people refer to this as the hobbit species. These are the smaller statured hominids that were in Siberia. Turns out that it looks like our ancestors only were hanky-panky with the Neanderthals a couple times because that DNA is highly conserved. But we made it quite often, it looks like, with the Denisovans. All right, there you go. That's what's in science. On to nature. Look, and there's the turducken. Actually, that's an artist rendition because the turducken is extinct, obviously. Okay, there is a nice opinion piece written in here by one of the leading world vaccine developers who worked on the SARS vaccine and the Ebola vaccine. And he is advocating a go slow approach for the following reason. He noted that when they were trying to develop vaccines to other coronaviruses, and very often you test vaccines in animal models, the same vaccine would have different effects in mice versus other model organisms. And so what that suggests is that it's going to be really complicated. So if you put in ferrets, monkeys, or mice, the vaccines didn't always work the same. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. Okay, the other thing that this person pointed out was that because we don't know what the asymptomatic carrier rate is, it's going to be really hard to do clinical trials. So for example, the 45 people that were just given the test vaccine by Moderna, what we don't know at this point, or maybe we do, hopefully they've been tested, have they already been exposed to COVID-19? And you need to know that in advance so you can know if the antibodies they're making towards your vaccine, if they already had them or if they are in response to the vaccine. Interesting, huh? Interesting. All right, here we go. Another strike against modern life. It's all about sugar. Sugar is the devil, as you guys all probably know. So somebody looked at the dental hygiene of dead Vikings. I love it. So they found graves, 10th century, and they just asked the question, what what did the teeth look like of Vikings who presumably didn't have access to the same sort of dental care that we do? They had fewer cavities on average than we do. Yep, with that said, I think I'll skip my maple syrup this morning. Or maybe not. And I think that really is all I have to share today with you guys from Science and Nature. I think it was a good week. Once again, my name is Mark Lubkowitz, St. Michael's College. If you want to learn more about the biology department, come check me out on the website. And as always, let Christ bring out the best in you and rise from the ashes like the phoenix. Have a great week. I'll be posting some stuff later on that's been suggested to me by some, I'm going to call them fans out